Welcome back to the Ekklesia Project. I am a freedman of God as your host on this journey to discover the lost Ekklesia of God. This is episode 62, and in the last episode we covered the first 4 verses of chapter 10, and what the gist of it was that Paul was setting up a comparison with the people of Israel and the people of the Corinthian Ekklesia. And he was given all these similarities about how they were all both baptized in the water and the Spirit, and the cloud being the Spirit, the sea being the water of repentance, being set apart, and turning their backs on the world and the slavery, which is kind of a symbolic of the slavery of sin. So it's kind of a symbolic baptism of the water of repentance, and the cloud is the where the Spirit would dwell among them, and the Spirit would lead them every day. Specifically when they needed to start moving and where they were going to move and when they needed to rest and how long they would rest. It all depends on the cloud, on whether the cloud would lift from the tabernacle, and it was always above the tabernacle, when they rested, being the dwelling place of God, the tabernacle. That was their temple, if you will. So once the cloud lifted up, it was time to, break camp and start moving. And once the cloud settled down, that's when they started to set up camp again. And they could move in the night and the day, because during the night they would have a pillar of fire, and I guess it was pretty strong to light up the way for all those people. I mean, there was certainly over 1 million. There's 600,000 men. And, and I think those were fighting men, but, so there was quite a few people, and so it must have been a pretty strong fire, pretty strong light, as they traveled by night. So this is, they were completely dependent upon the Spirit leading them, and they really had nowhere else to go. If they wandered off, they would surely die. And that is, again, kind of a lesson in and of its own. The people of Israel were required. I mean, they were like, they knew that if they wandered off from the path that they would die. So that's quite an incentive to follow the Spirit, and that was something that they needed to do, and that's the same thing that the Corinthian Ekklesia needed to do. It's just not as obvious when you're a people of God under the new covenant. You're not in the wilderness, or at least you don't feel. You actually are. I mean, you actually are surrounded by death and by by spiritual death, and you're surrounded with lies and deceptions that are trying to kill you. So, we don't think of it in those terms, and they probably didn't think of it in those terms. But the world surrounding the Ekklesia, the Ekklesia is like an oasis in a desert, and that's how they have to think about it. If they wander off from the leading of the Spirit and they start venturing into the wilderness, they will die spiritually, should be how they're thinking, and that's the idea. So, but in any event, they have all these similarities. They drink the same spiritual drink, the water from the rock. They eat the same spiritual food, being the manna from heaven, both of which Jesus compared himself. He is the true bread from heaven, right? In John 6. and the life-giving water. He talked about himself as a life-giving water. We looked at that in the last episode. So and this life-giving water followed them. The rock, it's kind of like some believe that there was a spring that led from the rock in the first instance to the rock in the second instance. That there was an underground spring that led to each of these rocks, and that was this following. It's hard to know exactly what Paul meant by followed them, but it is interesting that they got the water from a rock twice. The other time they got water, there was, I think Moses threw something in the water to make it, it was bitter, and then he threw this, I forget what it was they threw in the water, but he threw some stuff in the water, and all of a sudden it was clean and they could drink it. So, but we haven't gone into that. So this is how Paul set it up, comparing the people, the designated people of God under the old covenant, the people of Israel, with the designated people of God under the new covenant, being the Ekklesia of God in Corinth. So, and this is why, the context here is important, and you should pay attention to the fact that he is comparing peoples of God. You have to keep that in mind. He's comparing, yes, they're different covenants. There's the old covenant and the new covenant, but he is comparing designated people of God. He's not comparing individuals, right? So that's important to understand this setup here. He's talking to an ecclesia of God here. He's not talking to individuals. He's not talking to persons of God. He's talking to a people of God. And you have to keep that in mind as you read the rest. But he does make it personal in the sense that, listen, you're having a hard time with this idea of giving up your liberties. Remember, we're going back to chapter 9 or chapter, what was it, let me see. It was chapter 8, I guess, is when he first addressed this issue of giving up your liberties. Yeah. So he's giving up your liberties to help out a weaker brother. In other words, you're taking into account the other members of the people of God before you act, even though it might be an act of liberty for you because of your faith and it's informed, and you have a strong faith in that regard, a strong conscience. But even though it may be a liberty for you, it may not be a liberty for the rest of the members of this ecclesia, and you have to take that into account. And how dare you even tempt them, or even potentially be a stumbling block to them. And in other words, the way I see it in a nutshell is, don't exercise your liberty unless everyone else has the same liberty. If you had to sum it up, in an ecclesia of God, you shouldn't really exercise a liberty that you might have because you're informed, your faith is informed, your conscience is informed. And so it's not, that it's not something that is, disrespectful or dishonoring to God. Even though you might have that going for you, you shouldn't really exercise it in an ecclesia unless everyone has that same strong conscience and strong faith in that area. That just makes sense. So anyway, and they were having a hard time with that just by asking the question. It shouldn't really even have been a question to ask. It's kind of obvious when you think about it, that if you understand what it means to be a member of an ecclesia of God, and you understand what it means to love one another as Christ has loved the disciples, giving your life over, this life-giving sacrifice, if you understand that, it's kind of a no-brainer, right? That you should refrain or forfeit or refrain from exercising your liberty in a situation that might cause problems with other weaker brothers. I mean, the fact that Paul has to make a comment on that is probably is kind of discouraging, disappointing. You shouldn't have to. But these, I presume they're Jewish believers in the Corinthian Ekklesia that was trying to get Paul to just set the Gentile pagan worshipers that became believers as these ex-pagan worshipers as members of the Ekklesia, trying to set them straight. Just say, come on, get your head around this. These idols aren't anything. And that's what they were trying to get Paul to do. But instead, Paul was kind of rebuking them for not being sensitive, for the situation. So, and he's saying, look, this is what I do. And he goes through all that, that whole litany in chapter 9 about how he sacrifices everything for the gospel. And he is all things to all men. And he has no problem, forfeiting liberties and refraining from exercising liberties, if it furthers the gospel. He has no problem with that. He goes the extra mile, in fact, and says, I don't even want the payment of my necessities, which I'm entitled to get legitimately, okay, not illegitimately, as is thought of today, as is applied today, but legitimately, I'm entitled to get these necessities from those that I serve in my position, but I don't do it. I refrain from doing that. I refuse it. I go ahead and work for my own necessities. And why do I do that? Because I want to be an example to everyone in the Ekklesia to do the same. They should all be working for their necessities, including elders, by the way, right? All of the members of the Ekklesia are to be working to provide for their own necessities and not be a burden on each other or anyone. Okay, that's the idea. So that's what Paul was saying. And that's the kind of example he set, even though he really didn't need to. He was going above and beyond. That's how much he was willing to forfeit his liberties. And so if anyone would examine him and say, because when he made the statement, I wouldn't eat meat my whole life if it were to cause a brother to stumble, he backed that up. That's not just hyperbole. He's not exaggerating. It's not an empty boast. He's actually telling the truth. That's exactly what he would do. He wouldn't eat meat his whole life if it were to cause his brothers to stumble. That was just a fact. And he said, and this to prove that, this is let me tell you what I'm doing right now. So that's kind of what chapter 9 was about. And chapter 10, he's kind of giving them a warning. He's saying, look, you have to understand that things can go very poorly for you on the slightest neglect of your responsibility as a member of a member of the Ekklesia of God. You have to be very, very careful. And he gives examples. Okay. He gives examples. And first of all, he says, you're like, let's take a look at the people of Israel. Let's see, they were set up. They're set up like you are, except they're under the old covenant. You're under the new covenant. But let's just see what happened to them. And so now he starts giving examples of what happened to the people of Israel. Okay. And he says in verse, first of all, he says they had all these had all these spiritual advantages that you have. They were baptized in their mediator, of the old covenant, which is Moses. They had divinely provided bread, divinely provided water. God was taking care of them, was leading them, was among them, dwelt among them, the whole thing, just like you. But nevertheless, Paul says, even though they had all that attention from God, nevertheless, God wasn't pleased with most of them. And in fact, they kind of, died in the wilderness. They were laid low in the wilderness. It's kind of ironic because they would always complain. Oh, you're leading me here to die. God, why is God let us here in the wilderness to die? They were always complaining about that. And guess what happened? It was kind of like a self-fulfilled prophecy, wasn't it? They actually did die in the wilderness, And why did they die in the wilderness? Because they kept complaining about it. I mean, they never had faith in God. They would always test him. They would always provoke him. They were always challenging him as though, he wasn't a good father. He wasn't a good leader. You're just, throwing us to the wolves. And as a result, they actually did die in the wilderness. That whole generation, over 20, died in the wilderness and was not able to go into the promised land. So, it was like a self-fulfilled prophecy. They brought it on themselves. So he's basically saying, look, that can happen. Be very, very careful of what you're doing. Don't test him. So this is the approach Paul is taking. Notice that in verse 6, he says, now these things, sorry about that. Share my screen. Okay, so now in verse 5, we talked about that. They were laid low in the wilderness. He was not pleased with most of them, almost all of them, And then in verse 6, he says, now these things have become as examples for us. Now, what things? Well, the things that he's going to list. Okay. So that's kind of why I put a colon here. Instead of a comma. It's kind of like, now these things have become as examples for us so that we would not crave evil things as they also craved. Okay. Now, it's important again. Keep in mind, Paul is talking to a people of God. He is comparing them to a people of God. This whole section is in the context of a people of God. Okay, just keep that in mind, because I think the church system has always taught this as something that we need to be individually concerned about. Not to say it doesn't apply to the individual, but that's not the argument of Paul here. This isn't the thrust of Paul. Okay, and it's important to keep that in mind when you read some of this comments. Excuse me. So the first thing he says is, do not be idolaters. Okay, these are the evil things that they craved as a people. All right, and so he's saying, don't you dare go in this direction. The first thing that Paul refers to in this wilderness trip that the people of Israel is taking is he says, don't be idolaters, as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat. The people sat down to eat. Again, I'm trying to emphasize this. The people sat down to eat and drink and stood up to play. Okay. So we should probably take a look at what he means by that. All right. So, this is when Moses was delaying. Moses delayed to come down from the mountain. Okay. Let's see. All right. I'll just do this one. So Moses was up there on the mountain for a long time. Okay. And the people started to get anxious and started to get restless. And they basically said, well, maybe Moses is dead. Maybe God killed him. Maybe, I hope, because they're not liking this trip too much thus far, despite all of the miracles, all the wonders that they've seen. The daily trips, the heat, the lack of food and water, in many cases that they felt hunger, they felt thirsty, right? So even though God was going to provide for them and they just needed to be patient, but they didn't have a lot of patience. So he says, oh, it looks like he's may not be coming back. So why don't we go ahead and make a god, okay? And we can and we can call this our new god. This will be the god. We'll claim this god, whatever this god is, and it turns out to be a calf. We're going to claim that this god led us out of Egypt. This is the God that led us out of Egypt, right? They're going to get to more familiar territory. So they went ahead and gave and sacrificed their golden rings and everything that they could, that's gold and brought it to Aaron because Aaron kind of went along with it. Maybe he thought that he was forced to. Maybe he thought that maybe Moses wasn't coming back. I don't know. But Aaron went along with it, and they gave him all a bunch of gold, and he went and fashioned this molten calf. All right, and then the people says to Israel, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt." And then Aaron went ahead and built an altar before it. And this is Aaron. This is Aaron, the high priest, by the way, of Yahweh. All right. So this is, he's a pretty important figure, and he's going along with it, right? And then he says, tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord. So the next day they rose early and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down. And this is where, Paul gets the language where he says, the people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play. Again, it's the entire people that was in on this. They were going as a group. Does that mean every individual went for it? No, it doesn't mean every individual went for it. It just means the consensus of individuals, at least the consensus, if not the vast majority, went for it. Okay. So then, God said, hey, Moses, you better go down right now because they've already corrupted themselves. They've made a new God and they've quickly turned aside from the way in which I commanded them. And they're already, being a mess. So then he wants to just wipe them out. He says, look, Moses, why don't you just leave me alone and let my anger burn, and I'm just going to wipe them all out, and I'm going to make you a great nation. Okay? So I'm going to make you a great nation. So you're going to benefit from me wiping out these obstinate people. And it's going to be, it's going to be a good thing. So why don't you just, leave me alone and let me, take care of my business, and we're going to come, we're going to make descendants from you, and we're going to start this all over again. Okay. And then Moses said, no, you can't do that because of the Egyptians will make fun of you and everything, all this work that you did to wipe them out in the wilderness isn't going to make sense. And, so he kind of entreats the Lord. He intercedes on behalf of the people because he is the mediator, right? He's the mediator between God and the people under the old covenant. And so he acts as mediator and intercedes for the people. And because the Lord is pleased with Moses, the Lord changes his mind about the harm he was going to do with his people, right? So so all of this happens, and then he comes down. He hears, he sees what's going on. He throws the tablets. He's furious. He questions Aaron. What are you doing? And he says, it's kind of funny. Do not let the anger of my Lord burn. You know the people yourself, that they are prone to evil. So he's blaming the people, and he says, and they came to me and said, make a God for us, who will go before us. For this Moses, who brought us out from the land of Egypt, we don't know what's become of him. And I said to him, whoever has gold, let him tear it off. So they gave it to me. They gave me all this gold, and I threw it in the fire. I threw all this gold in the fire, and out came this calf. Well, I don't think it exactly happened that way, Aaron. I think you had to kind of use your tool, to kind of, the way I see it is, what happened exactly was, here it is, and you fashioned it with a graving tool and made it into a golden calf. So, there is that, Aaron, that you kind of left out of your story, right? It didn't just, a calf just didn't pop out, but that's what we do. So, I just think it's kind of funny that out comes this calf, right? So anyway, so that's what happens. And then, so Moses, and, trying to get these people in control and trying to get some order put in, he sends these Levites, I believe. Yeah, there's Levites, sons of Levi's, gathered together, and then he, apparently the God of Israel, he says, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, every man of you put his sword upon his thigh, go back and forth from the gate to gate in the camp, and kill every man his brother, every man his friend, and every man his neighbor. So these Levites were supposed to basically go kill their brother, their friend, and their neighbor. That's what these Levites were to do, because it says, whoever is for the Lord, come to me, and all the sons of Levi gathered together to him, in verse 26. So, when Moses says, hey, who's on the Lord's side? Come to me right now. And all these sons of Levi gathered with him. And this is the command that Moses tells them to do. And this comes from the God of Israel. This is a command from God. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel. I need you to go and kill your brother and your friend, and your neighbor. Those are your instructions. Now go. So the sons of Levi did as Moses instructed. They actually went and did that. Killed their brother, their blood brother, their friend, their neighbor, and about 3,000 men of the people fell that day. And then Moses says, dedicate yourselves today to the Lord, for every man has been against his son and against his brother, in order that he may bestow a blessing upon you today. So this is kind of foreshadowing this idea where Jesus Christ says, your love for God has to be so hot and so zealous that in comparison, you hate your mother, you hate your father, you hate your brother, you're basically your blood family. That this is what you need to, this is part of what it means to be a disciple of Christ. That you may need to leave some of your blood family and leave them behind. That's the kind of dedication and commitment you have to have as a disciple of Christ. And this is the kind of a foreshadowing of it, where these Levites were required to kill off they didn't talk about their son, but he says every man has been against his son and against his brother, in order they may bestow a blessing upon you today. So it was like, this was kind of some way of atoning for the sin of this idol worship. People died, in other words. Okay, so let's recap. So the people went for this golden calf. Okay, God wanted to destroy them all. Okay, he's tired of them. I want to kill them all. Moses intercedes. Okay, and then God says, fine, I won't destroy them all. All right, but he does give Moses this command and says, but this is, basically it doesn't give us the account of when God gave Moses this command, but he does give Moses this command. And so the Levites that come to Moses and they say they're for God, he says, well, this is what you're going to do. And you're basically going to kill your blood family. Now, I don't think all of your blood family, but at least your brother and maybe your son. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't say son up here, but it says your brother, your friend, and your neighbor. Okay? So that's what it says. And this is what kind of was a means of atonement for this people of God. Okay? So that he didn't kill all of them. Now remember, all they did was, make a golden calf and worship it. And for that, God wanted to put him to death. You understand that, right? I mean, this is why? Because this is a people of God. This isn't some random group that's out there, some pagan group who worships idol all the time, and they don't die for it. This is a people of God. This is a holy people of God, designated people of God. So it's a different rules apply, and you have to be very careful. But this is what they were headed for, complete destruction. And I'm going to make a people of you, Moses. You have to understand that. This is what was going on. They were headed for complete destruction for what they did. Okay? As a people of God. Moses interceded, and God said, okay, I won't kill them all. But I am giving you this instruction. Doesn't tell us when exactly he did. But I am giving it, and at least 3,000 men died. So people did die for this. Not all of them, but, 3,000. And then Moses on the next day, you committed a great sin. Now I'm going to go to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin. So Moses doesn't consider those 3,000 dead men enough, apparently. And then he says, they've committed this sin. Please forgive them. If not, please blot me out from your book, which you have written. So he's trying to throw himself as a human sacrifice, right? Send me to Hades. Just forgive them. And, that is not allowed, on this earth. We don't do that. You can't make those exchanges. So, God says, look, first of all, obviously Moses wasn't the kind, he wasn't worthy enough to even make that offer, exchange his life for the life of the people. He was just a mediator of the old covenant. That's kind of what Jesus did. He didn't say blot me out of the life, but he gave his life, right, for his people. And as a result of this, of accepting that sacrifice, God the Father rose up Christ from the dead, and he was resurrected. That was a sign of the acceptance of the sacrifice. But so this is when Moses says. But then God says to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot him out of my book." All right, let's calm down, Moses. This is how my justice works. If you sin against me, I blot you out. Okay? But now I need you to go lead the people where I told you, because I did relent. I'm not going to wipe them out. Go ahead and lead them. But I'm just going to send my angel before you. I don't want to dwell with them anymore. I don't want to be there. I don't want to, do that, because if I did, I would destroy them. He says that in the next chapter. But but he says, nevertheless, in the day when I punish, I will punish them for their sin. So this intercession by Moses bought him time. That's all that could be done with an intercession by Moses, because he's just the mediator of the old covenant. And every time they would sacrifice under the old covenant, it basically buys people time. You're not going to, okay, I won't kill you today, but I might kill you tomorrow. It's kind of like that, anyway, that's a reference to a movie, but that's kind of the way the Old Testament worked. The sacrifice, the animal sacrifices, didn't forgive their sins once and for all. It basically just bought them time. The atonement, or Yom Kippur, that basically was just an annual thing that they did every year, and it bought them another year. If it was accepted, by God, it bought them another year. That they would, the punishment would not go forth. But you have to understand that when you're a people of God, you're held to a different standard. Okay? You're held to a different standard. And 3,000 men died. Now, were they the worst of the worst of the people? No, not really. I'm sure that's not the case. They were just selected as people that would die because of the sin of the people, and they were in on it. They didn't try to stop it. They didn't try to do anything to resist it. So they're complicit, and they die. And could a lot more have died? Yeah, a lot more could have died. In fact, all of them could have died, but for the intercession from Moses. All right. So just understand. Now, remember, he's comparing this people of God with the people of God under the new covenant. There's a comparison here. Okay. That's going on. And he's making this comparison, and he wants the Ekklesia in Corinth to get real serious and to start thinking real soberly about who they are and who owns them. Okay? This is not a game. This is a holy people of God. Okay? This is a holy temple of God. And you better, get your head right and understand where you are and who owns you as a gathering. You better understand that very, very well. And you better understand it quickly, because you're showing a lot of signs that you're not getting it. You kind of think that you can do whatever you want. That's not the case. That wasn't the case with the people of Israel, and it's not the case with you. That's what Paul's saying. Anyway, it goes on in chapter 33, where, again, Moses intercedes and please, you have to be with us. You have to dwell with us. We're nothing without you. And then, and God again agrees that he will go with them. But in the end, as we've talked about before, in the end, the people, that generation, 20 and up, 20 years and up, that generation died. That generation was not going to be allowed into the promised land. So that was the first example. Now, why would Paul bring up this example? There's probably, obviously we have this whole problem about eating the idol's temple. Okay. And so you have this comparison, that a direct comparison. You're eating in the idol's temple, and you say, oh, it's not a problem because idols are nothing and all that kind of stuff. And that's all true. But Paul's going to bring up another point a little later, because idolatry is not something to play with. There's no reason to even get near it and to kind of like play games with it or trying to walk that borderline, as Paul's going to explain later. But the fact that it would disturb a weaker brother should be enough. You shouldn't even have to go further than that. You should just say, oh, okay, I got you. I don't know, you're right. I don't know what I was thinking. So forget that. I won't be doing that anymore. All right. That should be enough. But Paul's going to give him another reason. Yeah, this is probably not a good idea for you. In fact, again, well, we'll get to it when I'm probably getting ahead of myself. But there's another reason. The whole idea of division, the way the Corinthian Ekklesia was dividing in the beginning. What is that when you think about it? I mean, here you have Jesus being the mediator of the new covenant, right? Jesus is your leader. And we're going to talk more about that in another example, but they wanted to make this golden calf and say, this is our God that led us out of Egypt. This is the one we're going to follow. This calf, this man-made thing, right? And so we're going to go ahead and do it, kind of go back to our roots where things that we can control, things that we can design ourselves, and we're going to do that, and we're going to we're more comfortable because we can, if we make this golden calf, we can also kind of design what kind of God this golden calf is, what would please this golden calf, what would not please the golden calf. I mean, we designed the calf. So we kind of have a little bit of power now over this idol we made. So we're going to follow this idol, but we're going to kind of determine or dictate what pleases this idol and what does not please this idol. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they have more control over how they conduct themselves, and they could pretend that they're following a higher power. But by making it, by having their hands on it and designing it themselves, taking control over it, they can now define this higher power the way they want. They have a lot more freedom, to do that. That's how they see it, right? So, that's part of why idolatry and these kind of things. That's why that's kind of the draw, the lure of doing. You feel like you have control when you make your own stuff. But what were they doing in this division? They were basically selecting their own leaders, and they were selecting their own clan to follow their leader. In other words, they were basically they were trying to make their own Ekklesia. They were going to select their leader who they were going to follow. Of course, this be someone that knows God and is given the words of God. Of course, they're going to say that, right? Just like they said, oh, this is the God that led us out of Egypt. But they don't really, they put that label on the calf, but they don't really consider that to be the God, because the God that led them out of Egypt told them, don't worship idols. That's not what you're supposed to do. Don't make an image of me, right? Excuse me. So this was kind of understood that he was a jealous God. Okay. I'm trying to look back. Yeah. Cause all the laws and everything had already been given, he started, it was in Exodus 19 when Moses went to Sinai, and the 10 Commandments was Exodus 20. We're in Exodus 32. Okay. So all the 10 Commandments, all the laws had already been given. to the people of Israel at this point. And now they're claiming that this was the God that led them out of Egypt. Well, it clearly is not the God. You can claim it all you want, but it's just a big fat lie. Okay? So this is what men do. This is how men operate. This is what men want to do. They want to get control of it. They put labels on it. They tell lies, and they pretend. They do a lot of pretending, right? They do a lot of pretending, and so this is the idea of this divisions where they were making their own clan, selecting their own leader, and then pretending that this leader was chosen by God and knows God and is speaking the words of God. Well, that can't be true because God chose Jesus Christ to be the head. And now they're choosing their little leader to be their head of their little clan and their little ekklesia that they're making themselves. You see? But they pretend, they make it up. And they kind of live this lie. And that's basically what the church system is all about. Isn't that really, in essence, making an idol? It's like you are naming someone as your leader when you already have one. You know, a senior pastor is not the mediator of the new covenant. Okay? You can't name a senior pastor as a leader. And even Christ would say, don't do that. Don't call yourself a leader or anyone else a leader. But we do it anyway, and we make it up. We tell lies, and we pretend. And that's what the church system is all about. It's just one big pretend. So that's, again, it's kind of a form of idolatry, isn't it? I mean, you're replacing what God has given or his name and those leaders that he has chosen. You're replacing them with your own leader, with your own people of God. It's not really, I mean, it's your own group. It's your own gathering. You see, you replace it with the gathering that you want and following the leader that you have chosen. So that none of that is God. Okay? So that's what they were doing with this division thing. It was, that's a type of idolatry. You're impatient to wait for God to create this unified body of Christ. Maybe, I don't know what would, trigger you or trigger the Ekklesia to do that. They got tired of certain members of the body. They just didn't want to try to continue to unify. They didn't want to try anymore. And they got lazy. And they tried, let's do this shortcut. So anyway, this is part of the reason, and again, the obvious reason is the fact that they were eating at the idol's temple, and what that all entailed. And Paul's gonna talk more about that later. But the key thing to think about, and this is going to be true with every single example, is that you have a temptation, you have a trial, in essence, that seizes the people of God. Okay? It seizes them. So that the people of God all of a sudden are like captivated by this trial, this temptation, this stumbling block, if you will. And as a result, the damage could be horrendous. I mean, it could wipe you out. It could wipe you out. Okay, and that's what God wanted to do, was wipe them out and start over. And then the mediator provides some intercession. There's something that intercedes. Something that happens to placate the anger of God, okay? To propitiate the anger of God for just a time, calm it down, make it appease God so that God no longer is burning with anger to wipe out the whole thing. And then there are still people that do suffer and die, but the whole people are saved as a whole. Okay, that is the pattern. Okay, I hope that's clear. Let's go to okay. As another example, let's go to the next example that Paul gives, which is in Numbers 25, and this is the example with the Moabite women, and this is a part of what Balaam was telling the Moabites. Hey, you know what? If you really want to mess up Israel, get them to worship your idols and get your women, and in other words, corrupt them from the inside out. Get them, just corrupt the people. And that way God won't be pleased with them and God won't be with them. And, and you can take care of them. You won't have to worry about it. So this is kind of the result of that. And the people, it says the people began to play the harlot with the daughters of Moab. They invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods. The people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel joined themselves to Baal of Peor. And the Lord was angry against Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, take all the leaders of the people and execute them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel. So Moses said to the judges, each of you slay his men who have joined themselves to Baal of Peor. And then behold, one of the sons of Israel came and brought to his relatives a Midianite woman. Okay, so apparently one guy. I mean, they've been playing the harlot with the daughters of Moab this whole time, and this guy didn't know what time it was, and so he brings this Midianite woman in front of everybody. He figured, it's been normalized now. We can do this because we've been doing it for a while with other foreign women. So he brings a Midianite woman in the sight of Moses, in the sight of all the congregation of the sons of Israel, while they were weeping at the door of the tent of meetings. So I guess they were weeping about the idea of these leaders executing the men who have joined themselves to Baal. So when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, when he saw this Midianite woman with this Israelite, okay, when he saw that, he arose from the midst of the congregation, took a spear in his hand, and he went after the man of Israel into the tent and pierced both of them through. Okay? While they were doing the deed, I assume. So the man of Israel and the woman, they pierced both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through the body. So the plague on the sons of Israel was checked. Okay? And those who died by the plague were 24,000. So the plague was checked, right? And how was this plague checked? By this intervention with Phinehas. Okay? He zealously executed these fornicators out of this righteous zealousness. And he was, he turned away. The Lord spoke to Moses and said, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, has turned away my wrath from the sons of Israel, in that he was jealous with my jealousy among them, so that I did not destroy the sons of Israel in my jealousy. Okay? I should have probably marked that one. So that's key. So again, here's the pattern. You have this trial that seizes the people. That all these people are seized by this trial that's consuming them. This fornication, this adultery. and and worshiping, and or going to the sacrifices of these idols, basically to get the women, right? And so everyone's into it. They're doing it. The Balaam's advice is working. They're corrupting the people. And we have this situation where God wants to wipe them all out again. Okay? But someone intervenes with this, he calls it, he was jealous with my jealousy. That kind of a zealous righteousness. And he says, no way. And he makes an example out of this Midianite woman and this Israelite, and just pierces them right through. Okay? And because of that, God says, he has turned away my wrath from the sons of Israel, in that I was jealous with my jealousy among them, so that I did not destroy the sons of Israel in my jealousy. So again, disaster was averted. Okay. People died. There were still 24,000 people dying from a plague. They don't really talk about this plague, really. They talk about slain men who joined themselves to Baal. I don't know if that's the plague or if there was an additional plague. Usually, it's a plague doesn't really talk about execution. But anyway, so this is again the pattern where a trial, a temptation seizes the people. Someone intervenes, someone intercedes, okay? And as a result of that intercession, the wrath is appeased or turned away, okay? And the people are spared, all right? But people did die. I mean, there were deaths. It wasn't like it was no harm, no foul. There was harm. Okay. People did get punished and was suffered as a result of the sin, but not all the people. All the people weren't wiped out. That's the key. All right. So there it is again, the pattern. Now Numbers 20, the next example, I guess I should say, what does this have to do with the Corinthian Ekklesia? Well, again, this is a sin of immorality that would seize the people, right? This people of God. What was seizing the Corinthian Ekklesia? Immorality. Remember, Paul said that immorality is like you have a reputation of immorality occurring among your people, among your members. Okay, in other words, this is not a secret. You are being corrupted with immorality. Okay, and then you had that one guy that was sleeping with his dad's wife. Okay, and as like an egregious example of the immorality that was seizing the Corinthian Ekklesia. So you had this division that was seizing the Corinthian Ekklesia and causing all kinds of problems, which I believe is a form of idolatry. And of course you had this eating at the idol's temple, which is another probably example of being mixed up with idolatry. Okay. So that was kind of like, that's kind of like that's kind of the reference or the application to the Corinthian Ekklesia. So that now you have this immorality that was seizing the people of Israel, and the immorality is also seizing the Corinthian Ekklesia. Okay? All right? And they were having problems with that. So he's giving examples of the people of Israel that happened to the people of Israel that is now happening with the Corinthian Ekklesia. Okay? So let's go to the next example that Paul gives. The next example Paul gives is where they are they're just tired, and they're tired of this journey. It's getting long. It's starting to, it's just starting to wear them out, and they're traveling, and they're going around the land of Edom, and it says the people became impatient because of the journey. I mean, it just seems like it just never ends, right? The people spoke against God and Moses. Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there's no food, no water, and we loathe this miserable food. So I guess there is food. They just don't like it, right? And that's the manna that they're complaining about, the manna from heaven. They're getting bored with it, I guess. And so they're complaining of God's treatment of them, right? That it's too harsh. It's too hard. It shouldn't be this hard. It shouldn't be this difficult, And, why are you treating us like this is what they're saying. You just brought us out here to die. They start just provoking him, calling him a bad God, in essence, a bad leader, and just an evil person is what they're saying. I mean, who would bring a people out to die in the wilderness? It would have to be someone that's not a nice person, right? Someone that's evil. So that's what they're doing. They're calling God evil by saying that. You brought us out here to die in the wilderness. Okay? Because life is hard. Life is difficult. They're going through struggles. They're tired and it's been a long road and it's hot. All of that. So what happens? They're just complaining, right? That's all they're doing. Just understand that. They're just complaining. Okay? And what happens? God sends fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people so that many people of Israel died. Okay? But they're just complaining. I mean, everyone complains. Everyone complains. But yeah, that's true. Everyone does complain. But you know what? These are people of God. It's different. You have different standards. It's a holy people of God. You don't mess around. This is what I'm saying. Do you think that if people in a church system complained about the pastor and complained that they were being abused or things were too hard or that this was lousy and the sermon was, do you think they were in any danger of dying as a result of that? No, of course not, because it's not an Ekklesia of God. Okay, so it's not a people of God. All right, God doesn't own them. Okay, so this is what happens when God owns you. You complain and you might die. You know what I mean? And this is what holiness looks like. Just so we're clear. I mean, if you're sitting there telling God he's evil, you just bring us out of here to die. And this is, by the way, this is the whole people. The people spoke against God. The people. Okay? Not just a couple of individuals. This is the people. All right? The whole people. But not every single, that doesn't mean every individual, does it? Right? We've gone through that. But the consensus, the vast majority, we're in agreement with this attitude. So this is what this can be this is again about a people of God, a designated people of God spoke against God and Moses, and this is what happens. Many people of Israel died. Because why? Because they complained and they provoked God, calling him evil, basically, is what they're doing. And by the way, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, as I've said before. You brought us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness. Well, guess what? Because of all your complaining, because of all your defilement and unholy attitudes, yeah, you did die in the wilderness. That generation died. Okay? So But anyway, so many people died. And so the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned because we have spoken against the Lord and you. Intercede with the Lord that he may remove the serpents from us. So Moses interceded. And then the bronze serpent was made. See, he told them, set up a serpent on and set it on a standard. I think that's just a stick or something that you kind of raise it up. You kind of lift it up on a standard, so that people can see it, right? And it shall come about that everyone who is bitten, when he looks at it, he will live. And so Moses made a bronze serpent and set it on the standard. And it came about that if a serpent bit a man, he looked to the bronze serpent and he lived. Now, you might say, why a serpent? Why would God tell Moses to make a serpent? He makes these fiery serpents to bite people and kill them. Well, that makes sense. Serpents are kind of associated with the devil and evil and all that kind of stuff, poison, right? But then he makes this bronze serpent, a serpent, not a dove, not a, an angel, not a, I don't know what else you would make, a cross, just a cross, nothing of that nature, but instead he says, make a serpent, and then they'll look at the serpent and they'll live. So what I've often thought of why would you make a serpent? So I think that there is something to be understood by this symbol of a serpent. Because remember when Aaron threw his staff down, and what happened? Became a serpent, right? And the Egyptian magicians, they did the same thing, and their staff became serpents, right? But what happened was Aaron's serpent ate up the other serpents, the magician's serpents, okay? And there's something that I think needs to be understood, because it's like you have the deceiver, the serpent, the devil, as a deceiver, as a crafty, schemer, right? But it's almost like God can God is craftier than the greatest deceiver, and it basically deceives the deceiver in a sense. So it's like God beats Satan in his own game. And that's, it's like Jesus says, be wise as serpents, but innocent as doves. There's a lot of references. I mean, I shouldn't say a lot, but there are some references that talk about the serpent as representing healing, or representing a characteristic of God as an image that God associates with, right? And I just think it's kind of interesting how the serpent that was, Aaron's staff, the serpent ate up the other two serpents. It's like, you're not going to out-deceive me, or you're not going to be craftier than me, devil. You're not going to scheme better than I can scheme. So there is this idea where God can beat the devil at his own game. I get that kind of feeling, that kind of lesson that, God's a lot craftier than even Satan himself, that he understands how that works, in other words. But in any event, and the whole idea of dying so that his people could live, you know what I'm saying? It's that upside down kind of situation that God always flips things around, and death and horrible things. He uses these things, Satan's tools, against Satan in many ways, and gets his job done despite of all of the tricks and deceptions and craziness that Satan will put out, because God is even craftier and wiser and smarter than Satan could ever be. So I think there's that kind of a lesson that should be kind of thought about, considered. But I did want to point out that they grumbled against God and Moses, right? And they accused God, really, of being evil by saying this. You brought us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness. That's a pretty harsh, and they've said this more than once, right? They've said this quite a few times. And that's really you you got to have a lot of. I mean, saying something like that. I mean, I mean, are you crazy? I mean, seriously. I mean, wow. That is so unholy. That is so defiling. That is so profane. You see, and if it were said by somebody else, some pagan, no one cares. Nothing happens, right? But if you say it as a people of God, as a designated people of God, a people that God owns, and you say that, now you're in trouble. Now you're going to pay, right? Something's going to happen, yeah, and you're not going to like it. So many people died, and then there was this intercession, and they were able to live after they were bit. So again, the same pattern. They were seized by this trial, this temptation. They grumbled. They complained about God's treatment. That this was the trial, that they were seized them, and then people died. There was this wrath, and then there was this intercession, and the people were spared. Again, same pattern. Okay. And why did he bring this up? Okay, so there were definitely signs of discontentment among the members regarding the calling some were given. Okay, for instance, when Paul talks about it in chapter 12 about how, you can't say if you're a foot, if you're called to be a foot, you can't complain that, oh, I'm not part of the body. I don't feel like I'm part of the body because God made me a foot. And that reeks. I hate that body part. And I don't want to perform in that role as a foot. So I don't feel like I'm part of the body, and I'm going somewhere else. And we talked about that in 1 Corinthians 7, I think, where I think some were tempted to, that was part of the division, were tempted to leave the Ekklesia in Corinth, the one that God designed, because they didn't like the role they were given. They were complaining about their treatment. And in chapter 12 of 1 Corinthians, it's a little more plain. I guess we could, let me see. Oh, yeah. If we go there real quick. So they were saying, if the foot says, because I'm not a hand, I'm not part of the body, it's not for this reason any less a part of the body. So there were people in the Ekklesia that were complaining that I'm not in the role that I think I belong. God put me in this role. I think it's terrible. God kind of, did me wrong, kind of thing. And I don't want to do this. I want to do something else. So I want to maybe go over to this gathering over here with Mr. I am of Apollos. I want to go over to that guy, and I want to be part of his little clan, his gathering, because I might be given a better role over there. That was, we talked about that in 1 Corinthians 7. But Ear says, because I'm not an eye, I'm not part of the body. It is not for this reason any less part of the body. So, excuse me. So I believe that this was part of the attitude in the Ekklesia at Corinth, that they did have some discontentment about some of the roles that they were given. And so this is part of the example that Paul would give and said, remember, if you're being discontent with how God's treating you, and you want to tell him that he did you wrong, you better be careful. This is what happened when the people of Israel did that. And if that's a trial that seizes the people as a whole, like the division seems to have done, I mean, why else would they want to divide? It's like they were unhappy. They were discontent with the way God set it up. So they want to divide it, right? It's that whole idea. Why are you wanting to divide it? Why are you going for these other people? What is all that about? You're not content with the way God designed the Ekklesia of Corinth. So you want to design your own. That's really what's behind it. Okay. And so watch out. If you continue to complain and provoke God with your whining and calling him a dummy or someone that just didn't get it right, or someone that just doesn't care for you and giving you a trashy role, something that just is not for you, and you want to start making those calls, you better be careful, is what Paul's saying. You better be careful. Because this is what happened to the people of Israel when they started playing that game. Okay? So that's what I think is going on there. Now, in the last example, this is the last example, in number 16, okay? This is an example where you have Korah's rebellion in the beginning. Korah was, I think, a Levite. I'm not, or maybe not. I don't know. But they were kind of leaders of the son of Levi, the son of this guy, the son of Korah, the son of Levi. So they were Levites. I don't know, Dathan and Abiram, I don't know where they're coming from. They're not probably Levites. But in any event, they had this clan, they kind of had this conspiracy or this little cabal that they kind of put together, and they're challenging the leadership of Moses and Aaron, right? And they're saying, they assembled together against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You've gone far enough." So they had the backing of the people. Clearly, they played the politics. And so this group of people from the Israelites said, "Hey, you know what? You guys, we're done with all your nonsense." And for the congregation, all the congregation are holy. Every one of them. So they're saying, why do you get to call the shots? Moses and Aaron. We're all holy. We've all been baptized, in the sea and in the cloud. Okay, we've all been set apart, called by God. We're all holy. As though holiness is the definition of a role. Like everyone holy has the same role. Well, that's just not true. Yeah, you could have a lot of people that are holy. That doesn't mean you have the same roles. Just because holiness doesn't determine your role in the holy gathering. You're all holy. That's true, but that doesn't mean you all have the same roles. Every God just assigns the roles in the members of the Ekklesia of God. Okay, and you could be holy, and the whole gathering could be holy, and that's fine, but that doesn't mean that you each have the same roles in that holy gathering. As we talked about before, each under the new covenant, everyone has a different body part. You serve as a different body part in the full body of Christ. So, but he's making this argument for all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is in their midst. So why do you exalt yourself above the assembly of the Lord? Of course, they didn't exalt themselves. God exalted them. But this is their mentality. This is their argument. this is how they get all messed up. And this is, this is the kind of argument for people that have no respect, have no regard for what is true, and they just want what they want, and they're going to say whatever they have to say to get what they want. So Moses heard this, fell on his face. He spoke to Korah, and then they have this big challenge, okay? And it turns out, I'm not going to go through all of this, but it turns out that they have this. They're supposed to bring these censers and with fire in it and incense, and God was going to determine who he chose and who he didn't choose, and in the end, you had this Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, these dwelling places. Moses was told, hey, everyone, the congregation, step away from the dwelling places of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, the cabal, right? Step away from the cabal because something bad's going to happen and you don't want to be around, is basically what he said. And that's when he predicted that the earth would swallow them up, and lo and behold, the earth swallows them up. And so the earth parts, they just fall into the cracks, and then the earth comes back together. So that's kind of what happened. The ground split open and opened its mouth and swallowed them up and their households and all the men who belonged to Korah with their possessions. So they and all that belonged to them went down alive to Sheol, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. Wow. That's amazing. And all Israel who were around them fled at their outcry, for they said, the earth may swallow us up. So, and the people, there was 250 men who were offering this incense. Remember I told you about that? They were consumed by fire from the Lord. So this is what happened. Okay, so this is the precursor. And then after that, but on the next day, okay, I should probably, okay, yeah. This whole thing should be highlighted, I guess. So on the next day, all the congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. Boy, these people don't learn, right? These, I'm sure they liked Korah. They liked his plans that he had for them. He was going to make things so much better for whatever reason. I don't know what. I'm sure that they had the support of the people, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to make this move. They must have had the support of the people. Okay. But this is what happened to them because they were the big mouths. They put themselves out there. They got swallowed up. It's just the arrogance and pride that consumes us sometimes in wanting to exalt ourselves or wanting to be at par or bring other people down or say, how dare you be appointed by God as someone that should take that role? Okay, how dare you? I'm gonna tear you down. I'm gonna bring you down, and God's gonna say no. How are you gonna do that, buddy? I appointed them, so to bring them down, you're gonna have to bring me down. Okay, I don't think you're gonna do that. So, but they don't seem to think that through, and they just go ahead and blind themselves with their arrogance and boldness, and they try these stunts. But this, you'd think that how could they? When are you out of your mind? But this we all do it, and that's the problem. You got to be on your guard. So anyway, on the next day, all the congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron, saying, "You are the ones that have caused the death of the Lord's people. It's because of you, Moses and Aaron. We wouldn't have these problems if it wasn't for you guys. I mean, what do you think Korah was there for? Because you guys have gone too far. And that's why Korah spoke up to begin with. You see? So you're really the problem. If you guys would just back off and let us have a say in what we're going to do and how things are going to go, we wouldn't have people like Korah getting all mad and asserting themselves and getting swallowed up by God. It's really your fault, Moses and Aaron. Okay? You're the one that caused this. When you think about it, I mean, when it all comes down to it, you're the problem. And you're the one that incurs the wrath of God because of your outrageous handling, your outrageous leadership. You've gone too far. Is that what they would say? What would they say? You have gone far enough. Is what they basically was their complaint. You have led us all over the place. We're running around chasing our tail. We're not going anywhere. We're going in circles. I mean, we're taking forever. The road is long. This is ridiculous. We're done with all this. So, so they're complaining against those that were appointed by God to lead the people, right? And so they grumble against Moses and Aaron, saying, "You are the ones causing the death of the Lord's people." It came about, however, when the congregation had assembled against Moses and Aaron, right? They weren't done. They saw Korah go down. They didn't care. They still assembled against them, and they turned toward the tent of meeting. Behold, the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord appeared. And then Moses and Aaron came to the front of the tent of meeting. Okay. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Get away from among this congregation, that I might consume them instantly." Again, here we have the same pattern where you have a trial, a temptation that has seized the people. This outcry, this ganging up, this complete refusal to accept Moses and Aaron as their leaders, as their God-chosen leaders. So here you have this, and what's the result? God wants to destroy them all, destroy the entire people. And then what happened? Moses, they both fell on their faces. Moses and Aaron fell on their faces, and then Moses says to Aaron, "Take your censer, put it in fire, lay incense, and bring it quickly to the congregation. Make atonement for them." Okay. So this is the response of Moses and Aaron. Because why? Because the wrath of God has already gone forth and the plague has begun. All right. So he knew that God was, all they're doing is complaining against Moses and accusing them. And they want new leaders, right? That's it. They're not going to kill them, or beat them or torture them. They just want to replace their leadership. That's it. And what's the result? Because they're a holy people, because Moses and Aaron was selected by God and chosen by God and is owned by God. What is the result of that seemingly, trivial complaint? Replacing leadership is done all the time, right? in the church system, replace. He's not getting it done. Let's find someone else. Whatever. So that's not a big deal, but not in with the people of God. It is a big deal. Okay, you don't do that, because what you're doing is you're replacing people that were chosen by God to be a certain role, to have a certain role, and now you want to replace them. So what happens to these people? What does God want to do? God wants to consume them. Okay? He doesn't want to give them a warning. Well, shouldn't you just give them a warning? Or like or maybe like a really bad sickness? How about the flu or something? Something bad where they wake them up a little bit. Say, hey, don't do that. No, he wants to consume them. That's what God wants to do. This is what holiness looks like. All right? You have to be clear about this. So then Moses and Aaron, as intercessors, they fall on their face. They try to get this censer, put it, and they get this. I don't know why he would think of doing this, but lay incense on this on the censer, put it in fire, and then Aaron took it as Moses had spoken, ran into the midst of the assembly. For behold, the plague had begun among the people, and so he put on the incense, made atonement for the people. He took a stand between the dead and the living. He took a stand between the dead and the living. Okay. And what happened? The plague was checked. So here we have another example of a trial seizing the people of God, seizing the congregation. Okay. And there was an intercession that took place, and the trial, or the punishment, the plague, was averted. And the people, even though there were still 14,700 that died, to be clear, okay, people did die, but the entire people endured. Okay, they remained. So the entire people were not wiped out like they could have been. Right? I was going to consume them instantly. God was going to consume them instantly. So you have that pattern again. In the last, now, why did Paul bring up this particular example? Because he says, this is the, okay, so we can go, let's go, there was this feeling among the Corinthian Ekklesia that they weren't always in love with Paul, right? They would, hear other people out and see what they had to say. And it wasn't just about, being kind of loyal to Paul and saying, no, God, he is our father, in the sense that he is God has appointed him as the apostle, and he is kind of like the father of our Ekklesia, that we all came to embrace the message, the gospel, the kingdom of God through Paul. And so, unless you have something that's really agreed, it better be foolproof, because we believe that Paul is, says the words of God. Okay. That's just how we believe. Instead of doing that, okay, let's look at 2 Corinthians 11. Okay. All right. So in 2 Corinthians 11, Paul says, "For I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy, for I betrothed you to one husband." See, he is kind of like the one that mediated, in a sense, this betrothal, right? Where the Ekklesia was betrothed to Christ, as it's kind of an engagement, right? That's what betrothal is. They were engaged to Christ, and this commitment that they're going to get married. Okay, so I betrothed you to one husband, so that to Christ I might present you as a pure virgin. So he obviously, at time where after the engagement, the bride has to remain pure, or the future bride needs to remain pure and remain devoted to her husband, right, during that time. And that's what Paul's talking about. I wanted you to be pure. I wanted you to be devoted to your husband during this time when you wait for your groom to come and come back and marry you. And we went through that, the whole Jewish wedding scenario. But I'm afraid that as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, your minds have been led astray from the simplicity and purity of devotion to Christ. Okay? For if one comes and preaches another Jesus, whom we have not preached, or you have received a different spirit, which you have not received, and I don't even know what that might look like as far as receiving a different spirit. But they have received this Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit's manifested himself. They've had the inauguration. They had all these gifts. They've had the healings, and they've seen the power of the coming age. They've tasted of it. You've received a different spirit which you have not received, or a different gospel which you have not accepted. Okay? You bear this beautifully. In other words, you host these people, you're accommodating, you open your doors to them, you have no problem receiving them and hearing them out and enjoying their company. And it's like, what are you doing? You know, they're preaching a different gospel. They're talking about a different Jesus. You know, they're offering a different spirit. And you're just accepting them as though it's not a problem. You see, that's kind of like a betrayal. And that's why he's jealous. Because, what do I came and gave you the true Jesus, the true, I introduced you to the true spirit and the true gospel. And what have you done? You're not staying pure. You're defiling yourselves by inviting these other men in your life. Okay? And basically shaming Christ. Almost playing the harlot, right? By inviting these people. But these people, because he says, for I consider myself not in the least inferior to the most eminent apostles. These people were probably claiming to be apostles. They were false apostles, clearly, but they were claiming to be apostles, right? And maybe even a higher apostle than Paul, because they may have seen Jesus. They may have walked with Jesus for a little bit, just as Judas did of Iscariot. He walked with Jesus the whole time, right? So there are many people like that probably followed him around. And they would claim that they know the gospel, they know Jesus, and they don't. They don't know Jesus. They don't know the gospel. They don't understand the true spirit. You see? So these people were around, but even if I'm unskilled in speech, yet I'm not so in knowledge. In fact, in every way, we have made this evident to you in all things. We have been transparent. We've showed you everything we said has come true. Everything that we've taught you has come to life. You've seen it. You've seen confirmation of it. And yet you still want to entertain these people. You see what I'm saying? So there was this attitude in Corinth that was, in essence, kind of enjoying, maybe considering the new leadership, right? Even though God is the one that appointed Paul to bring the gospel to them, and he's clearly a true apostle sent by Christ, right? They were flirting with these false apostles. They were flirting, very not pure virgins, right? They were kind of winking and flirting and inviting and spending time with them, dating, so to speak. And that's not the right behavior for a pure virgin to be, dating other men while they're waiting for their husband to come. That's kind of the idea. So this is, in 1821, so he says, since many boast according to the flesh, I will boast also. These people that were claiming to be apostles, they're probably Jews. They knew a lot of stuff. I mean, they knew the Torah. They knew this stuff. I'm not saying that these people were complete charlatan morons. They came across as very believable, very credible, very knowledgeable, right? And that's how they sucked him in. They deceived him. Remember, it was just as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, your minds will be led astray from the simplicity and purity of devotion to Christ. You see, they were wowing them. They were blowing them away with their rhetoric and the way that they spoke, their charisma, all of this, and their knowledge. You see, this is the kind of people that were visiting them. And they were boasting about all of the accolades that they've had with other rabbis and other men of God, right? Many boast, I will boast of you, for you being so wise, tolerate the foolish gladly. He says, these people that boast about their resumes and all their accomplishments, their degrees and and their letters of recommendation, they're just foolish. They're fools. Because if you want to boast about the fruit, what God has done through you, like Paul says in Romans, what has God done through you? How have the Gentiles been obedient? How many Ekklesia of God have you established, Mr. Big Shot? You know what I'm saying? That's the kind of things that you should boast about. If you're going to boast about your credentials, let's see what you got, what you really have. Not all this accolades of men, recognition of men. Who cares? What seminary or who's recognized you? And you're like, pastor of the year or something like, whatever. No one cares about that. What have you actually, let's see the fruit of your message and let's see what you actually accomplished. That's what Paul's saying here. You tolerate this foolishness, this recognition of men stuff. For you tolerate it if anyone enslaves you, anyone devours you, anyone takes advantage of you, anyone exalts himself, anyone hits you in the face. So he's saying these guys, they intimidate you. They try to, to basically blow you over or overwhelm you with all of their rhetoric and their high fancy words and their credentials, and they try to just basically make you submit to them based on all the recognition that they've received from other men. And you guys, you sit there and take it. You sit there and take it. What are you doing? This stuff is worthless. Don't get intimidated by that nonsense. Don't you understand who you are? To my shame, I must say that we have been weak by comparison. So, and then he goes about the whole thing about all we're lucky to have this, but all the things that he's gone through, all the suffering and then all of his credentials too. I think he goes on and talks about his credentials, but this is for first thing that Paul boasts about, just as an aside. Well, no, he does. He talks about Hebrew, servants of Christ. Okay, so he barely talks about it though. He's a descendant of Abraham. So am I. Well, he's done a lot more than just a descendant of Abraham. He was a pretty way up there Pharisee. But anyway, so I don't want to talk about that right now. But he does. There was this attitude. Is my point. There was this attitude in Corinth, okay, that they seemed quite happy to entertain different experts, right, and those that would like to mesmerize them with their charisma and their knowledge and their fancy words, and all of that. And they seem to want to host them and pay for their food and all that kind of stuff. And they were clearly bringing a different Jesus, a different gospel, all that kind of. So this is why I believe Paul was talking about this idea where you're grumbling against Moses and Aaron. That's why Paul brought about this example that happened to Israel, the people of Israel. And he's saying, you got to be careful, because even though this is in 2 Corinthians, I'm sure that the spirit of this was already occurring. I mean, even the idea of the divisions and stuff, this idea of looking to other leaders, looking to other, people, because he said, you might have a lot of tutors, but I am your father, right? I think, I'm not sure if he said that in 1st or 2 Corinthians, but anyway, the idea is that, look, I brought you the true gospel. You saw it happen before your eyes. Why are you entertaining all of these charlatans and these people that call themselves apostles and these people that have all these recommendations, letters of recommendations? He talked about that in 2 Corinthians earlier. And you're not just looking at what you saw and just looking at the evidence, the fruits that you have experienced. So this is the problem the Corinthian Ekklesia had. They're always trying to look acceptable, more presentable, to be kind of recognized also as an elite and enlightened gathering. So if they could kind of get the favor or win the favor of these elite Jews that would go around with all of their highfalutin authority and prestige and titles and all that kind of, if they can win the favor of these people, they might kind of go up in status. Okay. I think that's what was going on. But so this is why, this is what I believe was going on with the Corinthian Ekklesia, and this is why Paul brought up this example. Now, so these are all the examples. Okay, do not be idolaters. We talked about that one. Nor let us act immorally, as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in one day. Now it says 24,000. I don't know. In my translation that I looked at, it doesn't matter. It's a lot of people. So that was the idea of the Moabite women right there. Let us not try the Lord as some did and were destroyed by the serpents. That was you led us in the wilderness to die, and you're basically accusing God of being of being evil, of being twisted, right? To lead his people and to die in the wilderness. That's not a loving God, that's for sure. And that's what they were accusing him of. And they were and again, some of them did and were destroyed by the serpents. Notice he's always talking about the death. 23,000 fell. Some did and were destroyed by the serpents. Don't grumble about the leadership. This is about the grumbling of Moses and Aaron after the Korah got taken care of. That's what that's about. We just talked about it. Nor grumble as some of them did and were destroyed by the destroyer. That's the plague that was happening. The destroyer is the plague. And how many people died? 14,700? Yeah. So that's how many people died on that. Okay? So this is the pattern. We went through the pattern. Every single example had the same pattern. All the people were going to die. There was an intercession. And some people died. But the people survived. They endured it. You see? And then I kind of, then he says this, now these things happened to them as an example, and they were written for our instruction, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. Now notice what he says here. It's easy to read past this, but he says, now these things happened to them as an example, and they were written for our instruction. Okay. So these things were, these events occurred, and they became examples to us, right? Is what Paul says up here. They became examples to us. These things have become as examples for us, that we would not crave evil things as they also craved. And here he's saying these things happen to them as an example. All right. The Greek is a little funny, but it's the idea that these things have happened to them and they were written down to serve as an example, I think is what's really being said here. And they were written for our instruction. Okay. So these were written down. These were recorded to serve as an example for us, he says, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. Now think about what that means. These were written down, right, for our instruction. Who's our? Those that are in the end of ages, end of the ages, under the new covenant, which is the last age before the final age of the millennium. Okay, where the kingdom of God comes physically, in reality on earth. So this age that we're in now, this new covenant age, this Ekklesia age, okay, this was written for us. What does that tell you? Think about it. What does that tell you? that these things that were happened to the people of Israel were written down as instructions to become examples for us who live in this age under the new covenant. See, what that tells you is we all belong as members of a people of God. They wouldn't be examples to us if we weren't. You see, this stuff doesn't apply to individuals, all of it. This is not something to be applied to individuals. Not saying that this stuff, you couldn't apply them in some ways to persons of God, but they're really not as examples to persons of God. That's not why they were written down. They were written down as examples for peoples of God. Okay? You see? Do you see the point here? And that's a very important point to understand. Now, you really have to burn that in, because these all occurred to peoples of God. And the pattern that I talked about is it has to have a people of God. Some people died, but the people endured. Okay? You understand what I'm saying? So, what does that tell you? That means that every saint in the new covenant belongs as a member of a people of God. That's what was assumed when these examples were written for our instruction. The assumption is that you will be a member of a people of God under the new covenant, right? I mean, otherwise they're not examples, really. Okay. These examples are all about peoples of God. And that's why he compared, you're a people of God, they were a people of God. And these were written down as examples to us in this age. Not just, in my lifetime. It wasn't just Paul talking about his lifetime. He's talking about the ends of the ages have come, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. Now, are we in the ends of the ages? Yes. Okay, so they're examples to us. Yes. So that means that we're supposed to be a member of a people of God. Otherwise, they're not much of an example. You understand my point? They're not examples for persons of God, not for refugees, not for exiles. They're example for peoples of God. This is an example for peoples of God. Okay, and that's what Paul was applying these examples to this letter to the Corinthian Ekklesia, which were a people of God under the new covenant, and that's what we should be. You see, it's an assumption that's made that people read right by it because we were under this deception. Okay, and then I put this in parenthetical. It says, therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed that he does not fall. Now, people will take this sentence and say, oh, see, this all applies to individuals and persons. No, that's not what he's saying here. Not at all. Okay. That's just a deceptive trick. That's not what Paul's saying. He's saying, look, and I'll just go down. I'll just go up here, where he says, nor let us act immorally as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in one day. You see, the point that Paul's making here is, be careful, because you may be one of the ones that fall, because people died in every single example. People died. Persons died. Okay? Not the entire people. They weren't wiped out. But persons did die. Okay? In every single example. All right? So don't be one of them. You better take heed. Don't be joining in any any acts of idolatry. Don't be joining the Ekklesia. Don't be joining the Ekklesia. If there's a consensus towards idolatry, don't join it, because you may be one of them that fall if you do. Don't join if there's a consensus, if this trial seizes the people in immorality, like the Moabite women. Don't join up. Don't be one of them, or you might be one of them that fall. You see, even in the messages to the Ekklesia, in the 7 Ekklesia, God would target his judgment on those that were culpable. Right? He was dissatisfied with the Ekklesia as a whole, but he was target his judgment on those that are culpable, those that were responsible. That's who he would target with his judgment. And those that weren't, that didn't, participate with the consensus, with the majority, they were sheltered. They would lose their Ekklesia, most likely, but they were sheltered from the punishment or any kind of judgment. So be one of those that are sheltered. Be one of those that are safe from any, punishment of sickness or death or whatever other kind of targeting punishment that Jesus may put on an Ekklesia. So don't be one of them. So, and there was examples of those in every single example. Don't act immorally. Don't try the Lord. Don't sit there and badmouth him. Tell him what a terrible choice he made by making you a foot. Don't you dare do that. And if everyone's badmouthing God for the choice for their role, don't join in that. You embrace your role. You say God is good. God is merciful. God, I love my role. Because God gave it to me. So he knows what's best. So I'm on board. I am not going to criticize God. I would never. And that's your attitude. Otherwise, you might be one of those that fall. All right. Don't grumble about those leaders that have been appointed to serve you, to edify you, to make sure that you're well fed or whatever. To make sure to encourage your growth and all that kind of stuff. Don't grumble against them. Don't be one of them, or you might be one of them that fall. You see what I'm saying? So that's what he's saying. Okay. And so he says, the next one, no trial has seized you plural. Okay, this is you plural, you as an Ekklesia. No trial has seized you, but such as is human. Now this is a tip. Common demand is fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with common demand. But I don't, to be honest, I don't even have a really good translation. Human is a fair translation. It's, in other words, it's allowed. It's one of the choices you could make. But it's like, these are things that were happening to the people of Israel. They're happening to any peoples of God. Will confront these kinds of issues. It's not unusual. And I Thyatira, Sardis, you could trace a lot of these things in those messages. Smyrna, Philadelphia, they could have been discontent with the way they were being treated because they were being so persecuted so hard, but they weren't, right? They weren't discontent with the way God was treating them because they were getting persecuted hard, but they kept the faith. They kept, being grateful, they have that heart of gratitude and all of that. So they didn't run into that problem. They didn't fall into that trap. But, the idol worshiping and the adultery, all that was in the message of Pergamum, the message to Thyatira, all of that was involved. Idolatry and fornication, all of that was involved. So all of this stuff is also involved in the messages to the 7 Ekklesia, even the where they're trying to replace Moses and Aaron. Sardis was basically doing that. What was Sardis doing? Sardis was trying to appease other men. They were trying to get a good reputation. They were trying to, appease, different Ekklesia or different, they were trying to look good, right, in front of men. But they what about Christ? They weren't paying attention to him. They replaced him with the opinions of men. That's what Sardis did. All right. That's a form of grumbling against your leader. They wanted to abandon Christ as their leader, and they who knows who was leading them, but whoever was leading them was basically promoting programs that were appeasing to other to get to men to get a good reputation and to look good. Okay, so that's what Sardis was doing, and so anyway, all of these same trials, these same temptations, they're very much applied to all peoples of God. All peoples of God could confront any one of these, right? That's what he's saying. But God, and God is faithful, who will not allow you, as an ecclesia, to be tried beyond what you are able, but with the trial will provide the way of escape also, so that you will be able to endure it, you as plural. And what does that mean? That's the pattern we're talking about. You see, in other words, God is faithful that he's not going to wipe you out and not allow for a way of escape, whether it's someone that intercedes or there'll be something that will happen that will kind of mollify the anger and allow you to endure the trial and not just, you won't be destroyed if you take that way of escape, right? And this is what God provided to the people of Israel. They always had Moses or Aaron intervene, or Phineas intervene. Let's see, what was I think those were the three. I think it was Moses, Aaron, and Phineas is the three interveners. Because Moses was twice, but this is what something will happen that will stop the damage, stop the plague, stop the complete corruption, stop the complete annihilation of the people of God. So this is what Paul is telling them. Okay, that you God's faithful. All these trials that might seize upon you, the division, right? The division that they were struggling with, the immorality they were struggling with, this disregard for Paul as a leader they were struggling with, the grumbling about the what body part they were assigned they were struggling with. They were struggling with all of these issues, right? And they were getting, all these issues were seizing on them at once, it looks like. But Paul is saying God will provide for a way of escape. Someone will step up. Someone, Paul is writing letters. Paul is praying for them. All of this kind of stuff. They will survive it and endure it if they take that way of escape. If they take it. Okay? So God is faithful, and he's not going to overwhelm you. He's not going to just not provide some intercessor or somebody to step up and try to stop all the nonsense and the craziness and all the nutty things. Someone's going to step up and speak the word of God and convict people, and there's going to be that, and you have to follow that. You have to follow whatever intercession is being made for you, whatever provision, whatever way out is being made for you by some leader or somebody that gets up filled with the Spirit, like Phineas, that was just filled with the spirit of jealousy, of going out there and just stabbing him like a skewering, both of them. That kind of righteous type of thing. Okay, that will be provided to an ecclesia of God. And there will be some damage. There will be some deaths. There's some people will take a hit. And he's saying, don't be one of those people that take a hit. Don't be one of those that fall. Don't Don't be one of those that die. Be one of those that survive it and endure it and are preserved because you didn't go along with it. Now, it doesn't mean that everyone that goes along with it is going to die. That's probably not true either. Just like in the examples, there sometimes the whole congregation was guilty, but not the whole congregation died. They changed their mind. They said, "Wait a minute, I don't know what I was thinking," right? So some will be spared, even though they were culpable, but some will not. And you'll see in 1 Corinthians 11 how some were dying and getting sick and this kind of stuff. This stuff was happening because they were also profaning the Lord's Supper in the next chapter. They were profaning the Lord's Supper. So that was a problem also. And judgment was coming down on them as a result. So this is this passage is often applied to individuals, right? And we all kind of look at it and go, "Oh, okay, we don't want to be," but that's not the gist. That's not the force of this passage. That's not the true application. The true application is to a people of God under the new covenant. But the church system can't interpret it that way because they can't, then the question is going to be, well, are we a people of God? and then you just open up a whole can of worms, and they can't do that. That leads to a lot more questions that they don't have answers to. So, but the gist of this, the true force, the application, the main point is that you as an ecclesia, as a people, can survive, endure a trial that seizes upon you, okay? Because God's going to provide a way of escape. And a lot of times it was Paul. Paul was that way of escape, by the way, for most of the time in the Corinthian Ekklesia. He would write these letters and they would repent. And he would send Timothy, or he'd send Titus. He would send people. People would come and visit. That usually they were the way of escape for this ecclesia. That these people would come and persuade a large group of them so that they wouldn't be destroyed, and the wrath of God would be settled. But in the meantime, some probably did die, because this is a holy gathering, and when you defile a holy gathering, there's a price that needs to be paid. Okay, so that's. I hope that was clear. I hope that you understood the pattern in all of these examples. This is not like, this isn't something that on its face that is obvious, but this is something that if you just dig down and look at it, and it's very consistent with all the language here that he talks about. And it's very consistent with the application to the Corinthian Ekklesia, the direct application and all the struggles they were going through. So it makes a lot of sense, and it's basically warning these guys. Look, and he's going to go on and talk about this whole thing about idolatry and say, so you need to flee idolatry, okay? Because and he's going to explain all the problems that they were going to have, okay? And we'll do that in the next episode. But he's basically explaining, your idea of eating in the idol's temple. You have to understand you're risking a lot. You're rolling the dice on this one, okay? And you don't want to do that, because look what happens on the simple things about grumbling and complaining. People weren't murdering. They were grumbling and complaining. Okay? Yeah, they were, and they played with idolatry. They played with fornication. They played with all this stuff. And they paid a price, a pretty harsh price. Okay? And you better be aware of that. You don't want to be one of them that fall. You think you're standing on holy ground. You think that, oh, I have this liberty. I can eat in the idol's temple because I understand idols. And I think these were probably Jewish believers. And He's going to explain to them there's more to the story than what you believe as personally in your life. Because you are not your own anymore. Understand that. You gave your life up. You know? That's what it means to sacrifice, to give a life-giving sacrifice, to present your body as a life-giving sacrifice. You're giving your life up. So you may have had liberties, all right? But those liberties you sacrificed along with your body in that initial sacrifice that was holy and it was acceptable to God. Okay? So that has been sacrificed. Understand that. I think is the underlying lesson. Don't be thinking that you can do what you used to be able to do before you were a member of an Ekklesia of God. When you had that liberty, because you understood. Okay? Because you didn't have any other, you weren't part of a body at that time. But now that you're part of a body, it's a whole different story. It's a whole different story. You know? Reset. And you got to think about the body now all the time. You're always thinking about the other members because you are a body part and you have to be one with all the other body parts. And you have to be thinking about the body constantly now. Now that you're a member, that's what he's going to be telling them. Okay? So it's a completely different mindset. And I know that if those of us, all of us, who are completely used to living on, independently, living with our faith and our understanding and doing the things we do based on our understanding and our faith and our conscience, okay? And all we're accountable to is our own conscience, right? Our own faith. That's all we need to think about when we do our actions. If you ever become a member of an Ekklesia of God, which I believe will happen, if you pursue it and seek it, and if you want it, I think it'll definitely happen. Why would the Father deprive you of it? He's gladly give you the kingdom, as he says in Luke 12. If you become a part of an Ekklesia of God, that is going to be the biggest change in your life. Is now it's a whole different life. Now you have all these body parts that you have to take into consideration before you do something. Okay? Now it's your job is to become one with all these body parts to be a full body of Christ. One in the mind of Christ. And that's like that challenge will last you the rest of your life and will take up all the time and energy you have. And that's it. And that is your true spiritual worship, as it says in Romans 12:1. Okay? That's what it means to be a disciple of Christ. That's what it means. You're giving your life to the people of God. You're picking up your cross and you're following Christ. That's what you're doing. You're loving one another as Christ loved his disciples. That's what you're doing. It's completely consistent with every teaching of Christ. Okay? And that's what it means. All right? So, anyway, let's see. I don't know where. No, that wasn't. Yeah, there I am. All right. So, anyway, so we're going along this journey and every, again, here's another passage that we went through that is completely changed. The whole approach to it changes when you understand the Ekklesia of God. You understand how it works and why Paul would bring this up and how it doesn't apply to individuals. We're not, this would mainly apply and principally apply to a people of God to endure a trial that seizes it, or seizes her, I guess, and the way of escape and all of these things. That's how you have to think about it. That's what it really means. And you can see it and when you go through the examples and you see the pattern, you see how it works. and then it becomes real obvious what Paul's talking about. So, but you're not going to know it, and you're not going to see it if you don't approach it with the eyes of the kingdom, and you're not getting the perspective of seeing in the new covenant of the Ekklesia of God. And I thought that was just really important to really to emphasize the idea that these things that were written down about the people of God. Why were they written down? Of the people, the Israelites, of their struggles in the wilderness. Paul says they were written down as examples to us, to instruct us in this age of the new covenant. Which obviously means that we are presumed to be, or should be, on a lampstand. We should be a member of a people of God. That's where we belong. That's what Jesus said we belong. And it's presumed that that's where we are. Okay? And those examples would apply to us if we were members of a people of God, right? So another example, another confirmation that this, the Ekklesia is the kingdom of God. This is what you need to seek. This is the goal. This should be your passion, your obsession. And you should just never lose sight of it. And if you continue to seek it and you continue to pursue it, and you're willing to pay the cost of discipleship, you're not worried about the here and now, and you want to live for the hereafter, God will give it to you. I really believe that. I'm becoming more and more convinced that God will provide an Ekklesia of God for you if this is what you truly want. You've got to cry for it, as we talked about in the last episode, and just really feel a passion and just an intense desire for it. Okay, and I know God will provide it. He's our Father, and that's where we belong. So how could He not? Do you understand what I'm saying? So anyway, thank you again for listening and for receiving this. And I pray that that passion grows in all of us, that we come together and we really intensely desire it and focus on it. And I believe it's going to happen. Okay? So until next time, thank you for watching.